A man lies face down on a treatment table in Tyler, Texas. It's March 21st, 1986. He's here for his 9th radiation session. Routine by now. 500 patients have gone through this exact machine without incident. The technician in the next room types in his prescription. She makes a small mistake, selects the wrong treatment mode, catches it almost instantly, and fixes it. The kind of correction a skilled operator makes without even thinking about it. She hits the button to begin. The patient feels something that radiation therapy is never supposed to feel. A violent burning shock, like being struck by lightning from the inside. He gets up screaming, banging on the door. The machine's console shows nothing wrong, just a cryptic 2-word message. Malfunction 54. No alarm, no description of what that means, just a number, and a machine that's ready, as far as it knows, to try again. He would die 5 months later. Weeks after that, at the same hospital, on the same machine, it would happen again, to a different patient, killed by the exact same bug. This is the story of the Therac-25, the first machine to prove that software left unchecked doesn't just crash, it kills. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what AECL was trying to build. Atomic Energy of Canada Limited had already built 2 well-regarded radiation therapy machines, the Therac-6 and the Therac-20. They were real workhorses in cancer treatment through the late 70s and early 80s, but both machines had something the Therac-25 would not: hardware interlocks, physical electromechanical locks. If the beam scanner wasn't in the right position, a literal switch prevented the beam from firing, full stop, no computer involved. The kind of safety a mechanical engineer trusts because it doesn't care what the software thinks is happening. The Therac-25 was AECL's next generation. Smaller, more powerful, and radically more computerized. For the first time, a single onboard computer would run the entire treatment. Positioning, mode selection, beam intensity. It controlled everything a technician used to configure by hand, across several separate physical systems. It was faster to operate and cheaper to manufacture. It represented exactly the kind of leap medical technology was making everywhere in the early 80s, trusting software to do what hardware used to do. And here is the decision that mattered more than any other in this story. AECL removed the hardware interlocks. Not because anyone thought they were a bad idea, but because the software was now supposed to do that job instead. The assumption was simple, and it is an assumption every engineer has made at some point. The code has this covered. The entire control system had been written by one programmer over several years. The scheduler, the safety checks, the actual command loop running the beam. It was all written in PDP-11 assembly language, evolving out of code originally built for the Therac-6. There is no public record of formal timing analysis, no evidence of structured unit testing. The programmer left AECL in 1986. In the lawsuits that followed, AECL's own lawyers couldn't produce meaningful information about who he was or what testing his code had gone through. That is the machine that shipped to 11 hospitals across the US and Canada. That is the system 500 patients in Tyler, Texas walked into one after another without incident. Right up until it wasn't. Before we get into what actually failed, it is worth 30 seconds on what this machine was doing when it worked correctly. Because the bug only makes sense once you understand the 2 very different jobs it was built to do. Radiation therapy works because cancer cells divide rapidly. That makes them more vulnerable to radiation damage than the slower, healthy cells around them. So the entire craft of the job is a targeting problem. Deliver enough radiation to damage the tumor while minimizing what passes through healthy tissue on the way in. The Therac-25 could do this 2 different ways, called modes, and the difference between them is the whole story. X-ray mode was for tumors buried deep in the body, behind muscle, behind bone, behind other organs. X-rays travel deep before losing their energy, so they can reach something the surface cannot touch. To make them, the machine doesn't just have X-rays sitting around. It fires an extremely intense high-current beam of electrons at a thick block of tungsten metal. That collision converts the electron beam's energy into X-rays. It is the same basic physics as a dental X-ray, just vastly more powerful and far more tightly focused. Because so much energy gets absorbed converting into X-rays, what actually reaches the patient is comparatively gentle and spread out. Exactly what a deep, safe treatment needs. Electron mode was for tumors near the surface, skin cancer, or something just beneath it. Here, you don't want to punch deep into the body at all. You want the opposite. A beam that deposits its energy right at the surface and stops, sparing whatever is underneath. For this, the machine skips the tungsten target completely. Instead, it passes the electron beam through a thin, scattering foil that spreads it gently across the treatment area before it touches the patient. Here is the one fact that matters more than anything else in this episode. The raw electron beam used to make X-rays is far more concentrated and far higher current than the beam ever meant to hit a patient directly. It has to be. Because almost all of that intensity is supposed to get absorbed by the tungsten target before treatment even starts. The safety of X-ray mode depends entirely on that target actually being in place. Now imagine if that same high-intensity electron beam ever reached a patient directly. No tungsten target, no scattering foil, none of the physical hardware the mode was built around. The result would not be a stronger version of a normal treatment. It would be something the machine was never designed to survive delivering. That is exactly what happened in Tyler. Here is what nobody in that Tyler treatment room could see. Two pieces of software inside the Therac-25 running at the same time that were never properly introduced to each other. In software, this specific category of bug has a name: a race condition. It is called that because the outcome depends entirely on which of two things finishes first, and that order can change from one run to the next, for no reason anyone can predict. You can run the exact same test 1,000 times and see nothing wrong, then get unlucky on the 1,001st. That unpredictability is exactly what makes this class of bugs so dangerous and so hard to catch before it reaches a real patient. Think of it like a hotel keycard system, where your door lock is on a slight delay. It unlocks based on which room you were assigned a few seconds ago, not necessarily the room you are standing in front of right now. Switch rooms fast enough right in that gap and the lock might open for the wrong door. Nobody did anything wrong. The damage comes entirely from nobody coordinating the handoff between what changed and what the hardware still thinks is true. Inside the Therac-25, one task ran on a continuous loop, physically configuring the machine based on whatever mode the operator selected. It moved the turntable, positioned the beam scanner, and set the beam current. Call this the setup task. It took a few seconds to complete each step because it was moving real hardware. A second task watched the keyboard. It let the operator type and edit treatment parameters right up until the moment setup locked in. Call this the edit task. Under normal conditions, these two never collided. An operator typing at a normal pace gave the setup task plenty of time to catch up to whatever mode was currently selected. But here is the exact sequence that happened in Tyler twice. The technician selects X-ray mode by mistake. The setup task starts configuring the machine for X-ray. It dials up a high beam current and begins driving the tungsten target plate into position. That physical movement takes about 8 seconds. Before it finishes, the technician notices her mistake. She hits the up arrow key and corrects the mode to electron treatment, the mode this patient's prescription actually calls for. She does this in a couple of seconds. fast, confident, correct. The edit task accepts the correction instantly, updating the treatment mode in software. But the setup task doesn't know to start over. It just continues from wherever it was in its sequence. And because of how the code was structured, it skips the step that actually redrives the target plate for the new mode. The result is catastrophic. The machine's internal state says, electron mode, ready. But the physical hardware is still sitting in a position built for X-ray. The beam current is cranked to extreme X-ray levels, and the target plate meant to spread the beam is nowhere near where it needs to be. Electron mode is a raw, high-current beam by design. It is meant to be spread wide and weak by that target plate before it ever reaches skin. X-ray mode needs the opposite, extreme intensity, because most of the beam's energy is absorbed converting it into X-rays. Cross the wiring between those two states, and what hits the patient is the full, unspread high-current electron beam, concentrated into an area smaller than a fingertip. Investigators later estimated the dose in these accidents at roughly 100 times what was prescribed. There is a second failure, hiding underneath this one, discovered independently. A variable inside the software was meant to act as a simple flag. A way of confirming a set of safety checks had actually completed before treatment could begin. Instead of being explicitly set to a fixed value once those checks passed, the code just incremented it over and over every time a background loop ran. It was an 8-bit counter. That means roughly every 256 cycles, it silently rolled back around to 0, purely because of timing, with zero relationship to whether safety checks had actually run. If the beamfire command happened to land in that split second where the counter read 0, the software read it as all clear and skipped the safety check entirely. 2 separate bugs, 2 separate root causes, but the exact same underlying mistake. Shared state, touched by more than one piece of logic running at once, with no lock, no atomic check, and nothing enforcing who gets to act on it and when. In a modern embedded system, this is exactly the class of bug a mutex exists to prevent. In 1985, on a machine controlling a lethal radiation source, nothing was enforcing it at all. Go back to Tyler, March 21st. The technician makes the correction. It is routine. She has done this hundreds of times. She presses the key that starts treatment. For a fraction of a second, investigators would later measure this specific accident's dose delivery at roughly 1/10 of a second. The full concentrated electron beam fires. Not the wide, gentle, therapeutic dose the machine display shows. The raw beam, aimed at a target the size of a coin. The patient describes it later as being struck by an intense electric shock. Not the painless, invisible process radiation therapy is supposed to be. He starts to get up. He is hit again. He gets to the door, pounding on it. Outside, the technician has no way of knowing anything has gone wrong. The console gives her nothing but Malfunction 54. She rushes in to find him in severe distress. There is no alarm built for this, no red light, no message telling anyone that the machine just delivered a dose roughly 100 times the prescription. Just a 2-digit code that was never explained in the operator's manual. A code technicians across the country had already learned usually meant nothing serious. 3 weeks later at the same hospital, on the same machine, operated by the same technician. It happens again. A second patient. A different mistake made the identical way. Quick correction, up arrow key, same race condition. The exact failure mode twice on a machine everyone still believed was safe, because nobody outside that hospital had any reason yet to think otherwise. Both patients would die from the overdoses. The first several months later, the second roughly 3 weeks after his accident. The physicist at Tyler, Fritz Hager, is the one who refuses to accept operator error as the explanation. He and the treating technician spend a weekend deliberately trying to recreate the failure, running the exact same keystrokes at the exact same speed, again and again, until they finally isolate it. It only happens if the correction is made fast enough. Skilled, confident, correct operation was the trigger. Not a mistake, not carelessness, competence. AECL's first response to Hager's discovery wasn't to fix the race condition. It was to tell hospitals to disable the up arrow key. Remove the keycap physically so operators couldn't make that specific correction anymore. It treated the symptom that had been observed, not the underlying defect. Two unsynchronized tasks sharing state with no protection between them. The second bug, the overflow-driven safety bypass, was still live. In January 1987, on a Therac-25 in Yakima, Washington, that AECL had already declared fixed, that second bug caused one more fatal overdose. It took that sixth accident, and the FDA formally stepping in, before the machines were pulled entirely in February 1987. The real fix wasn't clever software. It was AECL putting the hardware interlocks back. The same physical, electromechanical safeguards the earlier models had always had, and that the Therac-25 was specifically designed to no longer need. The lesson the industry took away wasn't to write better software. It was, software alone should never be the only thing standing between a system and catastrophic failure. You back it with hardware that fails safe, no matter what the code believes is happening. AECL's medical device division was gone within 2 years. Theratronics took over servicing the surviving machines, and the case itself outlived the company. In 1993, Nancy Leveson and Clark Turner published their investigation into what actually happened. It became one of the most widely taught case studies in software engineering anywhere in the world. It is assigned reading at MIT, at Stanford, and in virtually every curriculum that touches safety-critical systems 3 decades later. It is also cited as a direct influence on how medical device software is regulated today. Frameworks like IEEE 62304 govern the entire lifecycle of software running inside medical devices. They exist in part because Therac-25 proved regulators couldn't simply trust a manufacturer's word that software was safe. Here is the uncomfortable part of this story, for anyone who writes software for a living. The Therac-25's bugs weren't the result of a lazy engineer or an obviously reckless design. They were the result of a chain of individually reasonable decisions. Reuse code that already worked on an earlier machine, trust that a computer can do a job a mechanical switch used to do, assume that a variable used elsewhere in the codebase behaves the way you expect. Every one of those decisions still gets made today in every field that touches embedded and real-time systems. Automotive, aerospace, industrial control, and medical devices. The specific bug is almost 40 years old. The pattern behind it, shared state, concurrent access, no enforced synchronization, and trusting software to be the last line of defense, is not old at all. It is exactly the class of failure every real-time engineer is trained to design against from day one. The Therac-25 didn't fail because nobody was smart enough to catch the bug. It failed because nobody built a system where one missed edge case couldn't kill someone. That is the actual lesson, and it is the one this channel will keep coming back to, disaster after disaster. The failure is rarely the bug itself. It is the system that let the bug reach a human being, with nothing standing in the way.